Welcome into the Toyota Lounge for the DNVR Avalanche Podcast, powered by your Front Range Toyota dealerships. We got Rudo, we've got Eric, and we're joined once again by Evan Liu of Mile High Hockey. Thank you for coming on with us again. I'm going to be honest. You might not like the show we're going to have today. We're talking about the worst Avalanche games of all time, but you know what? Sometimes you got to go through the pain to enjoy the top moments of whatever your sport is. That's part of the whole deal. If it hurts, it'll feel even better when you do get to the top. So it's part of the process, part of the situation. I have a list of 10 games. Eric, I'm sure, has a list of games that he actually lived through. Evan, I'm sure you have a list of games as well. But before we get into the games, I wanted to start with this. What makes a terrible hockey game? Because let's be honest, I have some pretty bad blowouts on my list, but unless you're like me and you get paid to do this, or you are a fanatical fan, once it gets to 4, 5, 6, nothing, you can just turn the game off. Like, you are allowed to stop watching. So are those worse, or are the games where, you know, there's a little bit of heartbreak, close win, close loss type games worse?
Definitely both, I think, anyway, because mine's a mix of that, right? And like I'm definitely the newbie of the group, the young one of the group, right? So all of mine are kind of more recent than all the other ones, but I mean, you were right. I have a bunch of blowouts. I have a lot of close games. I already see some people in the chat having a few that I had on my mind. So we're off to a great start on this lovely Tuesday morning, just dampening the mood. So here we go.
I don't know if great start's the right word.
Well, I'll be the one that's going to talk about some older ones, as we know, and then, you know, I'll be. Is it good? Can you hear me good?
Yeah.
I'll be the one that's going to talk about some older ones, as we know, show my age a little bit, and some that I've lived, some that I've watched, some that I've, you know, obviously been part of. So, yeah, I'm excited for this. You know, it's easier to talk about it like 20-something years later, you know, so. But it still stings.
Yeah, I don't know. Some of them still hurt, I think, for sure, at least from the fan side of it. But, you know, let me ask you this. Do they hurt more as a player or when you were part of the front office staff?
Well, it's a little more like, it's a little bit of both, right? And you were saying like blowouts 2 seconds ago and stuff like that. A blowout nowadays is so different than a blowout back then. You know, back then it was like, oh God, here we go. Now something stupid's going to happen. And, you know, who's the coach going to put out there? He's going to put the dummy out there like me, not Joel Sakic or Peter Forsberg, right? Then you're like, they literally hurt physically because you get jumped or, you know what I mean? Besides the scoreboard, you know what I mean? 'Cause you're like, oh, are you kidding me? I got to go like this. I got to go see Bob Probert and those guys like that. Oh God. But yeah, I think it's a little harder as management because you have no say in the outcome. I'm talking about in those 60 minutes, there is no say. You have absolutely no say, and it's hard. So you're watching it like a fan, and I feel that it's even harder as a fan than a player or a manager because you really have no say, right? You know what I mean? Like as a manager, you can make a trade or whatever. As a coach, you can control who goes on the ice. As a player, you can go out there, do your job, and have 1 shift, 2 shifts, 3, 20 minutes. You know, whereas a fan, you have no say. The only thing you can do is cheer, and that's why it's so stressful. It's so hard. It's the toughest thing to watch a hockey game for me is by being a fan. Example, like if my son's playing, I'm going to watch a college hockey game. It's freaking the most nerve-wracking thing in the world. You know, it is. It is. And I would say second is, you know, management, and then third as a coach, you know, and then as a player. Because the player is easy. You're on the bench. You can figure it out. You can get out there and do something about it, you know. So I would rank him that way, 1, 2, 3, 4.
All right. Fair enough. To me, it feels a little bit like, at least as a fan, I could just sit here and say, well, yeah, they got blown out. There's nothing I could do about it. If you're a player, you're the one who has to wear that a little bit. So
True.
You got to go talk to the media afterward, which is us. We get to ask you the questions about it. So yeah, I kind of see it both ways. I'll put it to you that way. I did want to mention Ken Patterson's comment here. I had this in a completely separate category than like worst hockey games ever, because at the end of the day, hockey's a children's sport that people get paid millions of dollars to play, and there's no real world consequences to the results of a hockey game. Obviously, the Todd Bertuzzi thing is a little bit different than that, where you're talking about a guy whose career ended because of that, and the whole situation was not great.
I didn't even consider that, but it's a good one. I say good one in quotation marks, because obviously that really sucks.
Definitely good for being worst. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Well, I can add there just to follow Ken's comment there on Chad. So I'm working with the Avs at that time. I was in the front office management, and we had just finished trade deadline that day. So we were in Vancouver, obviously. The whole staff is there. It's a long few days, trade deadline. You're hunkered up in the boardroom there, in the war room in Vancouver at the hotel. And we were right down the street at the Pan Pacific, and you can walk to the rink. And I'll remember that day forever because of course, it was an ugly game. But being the younger guy in the management group, you know what I mean? And obviously, my dad being around, and those guys were worn out, man. They were worn out. It'd been a long few days, and we added a few guys that day. That's when we added Chris Gratton, Matthew Barnaby. It was a long day. It was a long few days. And those guys were like, you know what? We're just going to watch the game here in the hotel, and here you go. You know what I mean? Being the young guy in management, I was like, all right, that's fine. I'll go, because you always have to have, someone besides the coaches there. You know what I mean? So anyway, long story short, I'm upstairs, and when the brouhaha all started, you could feel it. It was kind of getting crazy a little bit, and I was by myself, and I'm like, I called the hotel. I'm like, guys, I just feel something right now. This is going sideways. And next thing you know, Pierre was back. They took, they got in the car. Actually, they walked down to the rink, and I think if you go back to that thing there, I think Stephen Walken was the referee, and you can see Pierre going right to the bench, which he's never done in his freaking career. Obviously, he's not a coach or anything. He goes on the bench, and he starts a conversation with Stephen Walken about how to calm things down there, and it was crazy because I was by myself, and I was getting a little nervous, and again, called for help, and the guys came over from the hotel, and next thing you know, it's like I said, it's an ugly game in the history of the Avalanche for sure. Yeah.
So yeah, that one to me is kind of out on its own as a bad game in the sense that real world consequences were involved in that one, whereas the vast majority of the games we're going to talk about tonight, a team got blown out or it was a sad loss or whatever. So a little bit different there, but definitely worth noting. Beyond that game, I want to ask both of you, without getting into detail, first game that comes to mind when you think of worst Colorado Avalanche game?
Very recent.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that because there's a lot you could choose from this last season.
Eric?
Well, mine's an old one, one that I played in. So, you want me to jump on it or?
Yeah, go for it. If you one comes right to mind.
Oh yeah. Mine is, for me, my career as a player with the Avalanche, I would say that's my toughest one. It's the 1997 Game 6 against Detroit in the semifinals, right? Western Conference Finals. I got to be honest with you. I really thought, and not I, but the whole league thought, we were the best team in hockey. 96, they had won the cup. That year, 96, 97, we were on fire. We won the President's Trophy, and we had a decent first couple rounds, and I'll say it again. I think we ran out of gas. I'm still mad about that freaking World Cup that summer. Which the U.S. won. It was awesome hockey. It was amazing. Don't get me wrong, but it put a short summer with the cup, and then a short summer because of the tournament in early September. And next thing you know, the guys were worn out. Guys had nothing left. Joe had nothing left. Peter had nothing left. Valerie. You gotta remember, we were such a star-studded team. So you had about 10, 12 guys at that, at that showcase in the summer there. And I really felt that, obviously, we lost the Stanley Cup that night. We shit-kicked them Game 5 at home. I want to say it was 8-1 or something like that. And then we were like, okay, we got the momentum back, and we went game 6. We had nothing. I mean, it's one of those games you sit there and you're like, yeah, we have no shot. I don't know why. And then, that was for me the most disappointing game as a player with the Avalanche. So that would be game 6 of the 97 playoffs Western Conference Finals against the beloved Detroit Red Wings. And they went on to win the Stanley Cup 4 straight. No shit. We would have won 4 straight too.
The first heartbreak for the Colorado Avalanche, right? That coming in, winning the cup their first year, they'd never really experienced that. Obviously, the players had, but the fan base as a whole, that was the first time they weren't just the best team in the NHL. So definitely a good one on the list.
Yeah, first major championship in Denver, right?
Yep.
Was that 1996 Stanley Cup run. So certainly a little bit heartbreaking then. I can imagine. Anyway, I'm not gonna make you guys feel older than you already are. So my apologies. But I guess I'll piggyback off of that one, Eric, a little bit, because this is not the very recent one. I should preface. But it's another Western Conference Final against the Detroit Red Wings. And Bruce Banner already kind of mentioned it in the chat. Game 7, 7-0 blowout.
Yep.
And that was the most one-sided Game 7 score in NHL history. Like that's an ugly one. And I guess kind of on the back end of that as well, you have the game before Patrick Waugh has the failed Statue of Liberty. Yeah. And that ultimately led to the Avs getting shut out in that game. And then, of course, the next game as well. So they got, what was it, 9-0 within a span of 2 games. So pretty ugly twofer right there.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in on that one. That's how old I am, as you know. And I was assistant coach / video with the Avalanche. That was my first year out. I was like, you know what? I never won the cup as a player. I missed both of them, 96 and 01. I haven't been there, summer of 96, right after they won. And then I haven't been traded the year before they won in 01 or whatever 2 years before. But that was my first year out of playing. I was part of the coaching staff with Bob Hartley, and I mean, listen, I remember like it was yesterday, and that old Joel Louis Arena, it was so bad. Like the coach's room was actually in the bathroom. It's in a public bathroom it's urinals everywhere. You're sitting there. That's the coach's office. That was the coach's office. I loved the building. I hated the coach's area. And I'll tell you one thing, Evan, I was just sitting there, and it got ugly right off the bat. Alex Tanguay was injured. He wasn't playing. He was right next to me, so he watched the game with me, and we're looking at each other like, oh, my God, this is going to be ugly. You know what I mean? And I felt so bad for Patty. He had such a tremendous year that year, and then it was such a bad way to, with, like you said, the Statue of Liberty. It'd been a long playoff for him personally, and I think that I do believe he might have retired that year. You know what I mean? And then but it ended up so bad that he went back for another year. You know what I mean? Like I think it was just like he had such a wonderful year. I don't think he wanted to end it up on that game. And it's the Detroit Red Wings of all people, right? You're just like, you got to be kidding me. The one thing though about that bad coach's room is they're owned by Little Caesars Pizza. Well, I can promise you that. By the second period, I think I was 4 full pizzas deep by myself, trying to eating my sorrows and just being miserable. It was a tough one. And yeah, it just comes to mind because you're just so hopeless. It was ugly. It was ugly.
That why they named the new arena the Pizza Palace in honor of you?
Yes. Yes. Hey, you got to remember, I was always friends with every freaking locker room attendant. Doesn't matter what city. And you know me, it comes about food. Yeah. Vancouver, I had Johnny there with the freaking, salmon sticks. And, you know what I mean? Like, but obviously Joe Louis was the Little Caesars when, the Illich family. And they're so generous with that over there. They bring you, I'll tell you one thing. I'm telling you right now, I was 4 deep. Not 4 slices, 4 pizzas deep by the second period.
Well, eating away the worst games is definitely one option. Maybe be a little bit healthier than that, though, and get yourself with UC Health, whether it's eating right or dealing with tough losses, UC Health knows how important mental health is and encourages Coloradans to live their healthiest lives through statewide initiatives that include taking care of your mental health. They want you to live like there is a tomorrow. They have a ton of great stories on their website, including former UC Health patient David Schlicht, a Colorado teenager who loves being active outdoors, is a prime example of taking care of their mental health and living like there is a tomorrow. At one point, he was an Olympic hopeful. Unfortunately, a ski training accident required him to amputate one of his legs, but he stayed strong, got through that, and is now living his best life as he can. You can learn more about David's story and see more inspiring patient stories from UC Health when you head over to uchealth.org/tomorrow to learn what it means to live like there is a tomorrow. And once you've hit up UC Health, make sure you're living as healthy as you can. Make sure you also hit up Toyota. So if you want to live healthy, maybe you want to go for a hike, go get yourself in a Toyota. 17 different all-wheel or four-wheel drive vehicles here for Colorado. If you like going off-roading, they have you fully covered there. They also have 16 different hybrid vehicles to choose from. A vehicle for everyone, no matter what it is that you're looking for. Toyota is the official vehicle of the Colorado Avalanche and the official vehicle of DNVR. So go check one out today at your local Front Range Toyota dealerships, including AutoNation Toyota Arapahoe and Centennial, Corwin Toyota in Boulder, Groove Toyota in Littleton, Mountain States Toyota in Denver, Stevenson Toyota East in Aurora, and Stevenson Toyota West in Lakewood. Again, the official vehicle of both the Colorado Avalanche and us here at DNVR is Toyota. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. I wanted to stick with a little bit of the older ones first here because I have two games that I wanted to talk about. Eric, you already mentioned one of them. I'll get to that one in a second. First, what was at the time the worst loss in Avalanche history, at least statistically? 1999 December, I think you just missed it, Eric. You just had gotten traded out of Colorado before this. They lose 7-0 to the Arizona Coyotes. Just got inducted in, well, not inducted, but announced as part of the Hall of Fame. Jeremy Roenick had a hat trick that night. It's obviously most people probably don't remember this game because it's a nothing game in December. But is that the source maybe of the weirdness where Colorado seems to hate the Arizona Coyotes? I know Nathan McKinnon has his own beefs there a little bit, but now Utah, I guess. There always seems to be a little extra beef between those two teams.
There always has been a little bit of something. That is for sure. And again, that was before my time, so I can't really speak to anything that happened in that game, but I guess so, right? I guess you could attribute it to that, right?
I'm just trying to find a source. I don't know. I might be reaching a little bit, but
it's understandable at least. I mean, what the Yotes were created as a franchise in a similar-ish time, right?
Yeah, 93 is when they moved, I think.
Something like that. And they were, at the time anyway, one of the closer rivals, for lack of a better term, with the Avalanche.
Geographically, for sure,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, geographically. So, it could have been something. There could have been something there, at least, and they've always had their moments here and there, right? And, now, of course, with the team in Utah, you never know, I guess. Same players, same faces, all that sort of stuff. But a 7-0 loss, I can understand why that could at least be in the back of some people's minds, for sure.
Well, I'm going to tell you something for sure, that 7-0 loss you're talking about, it wasn't my fault. So, I wasn't there.
So they hadn't traded you, they'd have won. Confirmed, yeah.
Yeah, I was gone by then. So it's perfect. But I do remember someone in the locker room saying, it's not his fault. He's not here because, long story, it's a different pod. Apparently, it was my fault that we had a tough start that year. So, sorry, the year before. So, no, that year. Yeah. Anyway, but you know what? You're right. There was always a little rivalry with Phoenix. And you got to remember, Roenick was there, right? Kachuk was there.
Yeah.
Sean Burke. They had some good Tony Amont. They had some good players. They really did. You know what I mean? And they were an exciting team. And there was always been a little bit of a rivalry, maybe from '96 between Patty and JR, right? Jeremy Roenick remember when he's like,
Yep.
I don't know where Patty was on that, whatever, when he deked him and he said, I am 2 Stanley Cups plugged in my ears. And, there's always been a little bit of a rivalry there. So, I think they always took pleasure in beating us. I don't know if Patty was in that night, but there's a few that you can remember. And like I said to you, I think it's tougher for a fan, the 7-0s and 10-0s and the Montreal game I saw in the air there that somebody was talking about, because I think as a player, it's like you lost 2-1 or you lost 7-1. It's all the same.
You only
know what I mean?
scored
Like,
one
you
either
lost-
way. Yeah.
you lost the game and you're getting on the plane and you're going to the next city, and you got to be able to, I say it all the time, right? Ted Lasso, goldfish memory. You have to in this league, especially as a goalie, as a coach, as a player. You have to move on, but they sting for fans, you know what I mean? And then you go back to a Coors Light or whatever because you're like, God, that was brutal, you know what I mean? But as a player, it's not that you don't care. It's actually that you can't care that much, meaning like you have to move on. You have to get ready for the next one. So
Yeah.
But there's been a few, and that's a good one. That 7-0, I do remember, because maybe somewhere inside of me I was a little excited that they got shit kicked because I wasn't.
The other one you had already mentioned, Patrick Waugh's last game, Andrew Brunette ending his career essentially. That one, not the blowout style, but more of a sad from a fan perspective of watching the end of his career as arguably the greatest goaltender of all time, and really marked what should have been the end of an era for the Colorado Avalanche. They had, one more year before the lockout that really ended them, but the beginning of the end for that Avs 1.0 contender era for me.
Great. You're right. You're bang on. And that's on my list right here. I'm looking at my list, and that was right there as the 5-6 games that I wrote, because I did believe that was a tough start. Friend of the show, Bob, I was let go that year, right? So it's, it just, whatever, a change was needed. Like, obviously Pierre made the decision and Tony took over. And I think the last 50 games was ridiculous. Like we didn't lose many games. It was outstanding. And Milan won the Rocket. Peter won. I think Peter won. Did Peter win the MVP that year, or he won the scoring title? Won the scoring title.
Scoring. Well, I think he won both.
He won. Did he win both? I don't remember.
Yeah.
But again, what a player he was. But it was crazy. And then you get Minnesota Wild in the playoffs, and you got a commanding 3-1 lead. And I'll tell you one thing, and I've lived it as a player, and I'll talk about it later, one of my games that I want to talk about. But you lose momentum. I don't know what it is, and you can't get it back. And all of a sudden it's 3-2. Next thing is 3-3. And next thing you know, it's Game 7 in overtime. And you got Andrew Brunette. Love Bruno. I love him. One of the guys, obviously became an Av later. What a gentleman. What a coach. He's been doing an unbelievable job in Nashville. He's a great hockey mind. Joe Sakic loved playing with him, by the way. But anyway, I can make fun of him because he's slow as molasses on the ice. He's one of the slowest players ever. But he was such a smart player. I don't know how this guy played. He wasn't fast, but he was so smart. That shows you. I know how he played. He was smart. But he just kind of beats Patty there on that backhand. And I think to this day, it's everywhere still in the freaking press box in Minnesota. When you walk in, it's just a big poster of that moment. And you're like, oh, God, you just want to throw up. You know what I mean? Like, you can't let it go. Every time you walk by it, you're like, I'm gonna yak my dinner here. But, yeah, that was a tough one. And I do believe that year there was a good, I don't know why we couldn't turn it around. But I tell you one thing, if we did, it could have been a dangerous playoffs for the rest of the league for sure.
I want to switch gears here and get to some of the more recent ones that Evan has here. So which recent game is the worst one that comes to mind?
The very last one that just happened for the Avalanche. And this one's more of a personal one for me because I grew up loving Matt Duchene. I still remember the very first Avs game that I ever went to as like a 9-year-old.
Yep.
It was against the New York Rangers, December 2009, 2010, something like that. Duchene scored 2 goals. It was absolutely phenomenal and fell in love with him. Of course, that didn't end very well, a few years later. And then, of course, it just had to be him ending it in Game 6 of this most recent playoff stretch. And the heartbreak celebration heard around the world.
Yeah.
That one still stings me. It was up until 2 a.m. that morning writing, and I was just like, ugh, why?
Yeah.
Why him?
Had to
Out
be
of everybody,
Duchene.
it had to be him, right? But at least it turned out to be nothing in the end for Dallas, right?
Yeah,
and I'm kind of happy about that.
Didn't go anywhere.
But yeah, that's what I mean by very, very recent.
That,
like I said, that one's more of a personal one.
No, I think it's fair. Anyone who grew up in that era was like, Matt Duchene, really? This is really what we're going to do this whole summer? Okay, fine. Definitely on the list. A fair one to be sure. I've one for each of you here that I would compare these ones to. One of these doesn't really count because it's a game in which he didn't end up playing ultimately, but might be. No, you should have. You were probably a fan for this. Maybe it was a little bit before. Peter Forsberg's last game, or rather the game that he didn't play, because if you remember when he came back the last time, he played 2 games with the Avs, and then he was supposed to play the game they came home. He played 2 away games. They came back to Colorado, and then like an hour or 2 before the game, they were like, yeah, Peter Forsberg's too hurt. He can't do it. He says he's done forever. And as growing up, Peter Forsberg was my favorite player. So personally, that one for me, watching his career end and him just not being able to skate anymore, that one hurt a little bit.
You're right. Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
No. I was going to move on. So if you have something to say on it.
No. I mean, I was working with the Avs, and we were in Columbus. Was that the 2 games he played? I don't remember if that was the first one or the second one. I was in Columbus, and I remember talking to him on the bus, and he was like, I don't feel right. I mean, it doesn't feel right. And, so it didn't surprise me, that was it for him. But at least, he got to dig till the end and see if he could be possible. They have no regrets. And, I think he moved on and he had no regrets.
I think he did. I have regrets.
No, I mean, you have regrets. I mean, I'm talking about mental regrets, like, I should have tried it. You know what I mean? And he knew he couldn't play anymore.
He did everything he could. It just sucks for me as a fan at the time.
100%. It sucked for me too. Like he was my favorite player to watch. I mean, I played with him, and like I said to you, it was so amazing to watch him play. It just, again, I played with some great players, but Peter is like, and by himself, because he was so different. You know what I mean? He was so different, but he was amazing to play with, yes.
Yeah. On the flip side, I also have a Dallas playoff series game on here, but I have the 2020 bubble game 7.
I know which one you're talking about. I was thinking about that one too.
That one hurt for me because, one, the Avs had a lead with 5 minutes to play. They really should have won that game. But 2, obviously all the bubble weirdness comes into play there, but the Avs were starting Michael Hutchinson in that game. Like, had the Avs had a little bit better injury luck, I think they get past that Dallas team, but they just didn't have it. And you watched what was really, I don't want to call it the beginning because that might be the San Jose series, which also has a game that's probably on this list, but you felt like the Avs were on the up and up at that point. This new era was kind of starting to bud into genuine championship contenders. And injury luck plus their inability to hold a lead made us wait what ended up being 2 more years to see them do the thing.
Right. I remember that. Oh, my gosh. Well, I remember that entire season really kind of as a whole. I remember that opening night and, one feeling missing out. That was my freshman year of college. I was just watching in my dorm room, and I was like, oh, my gosh, I can feel it, right? Yep. And I was an hour away in Fort Collins. Go Rams, by the way. Sorry for all the Buffs listeners here. But and then, of course, leading into the bubble, the pandemic, and that was kind of for lack of a better term, the only thing going on. And it was fun and exciting to feel like you have something to cheer for in the middle of this worldwide pandemic. Yeah. And I will never remember just when, I forget who it was behind the net, but whenever he was behind the net and he stood there for 2-3 seconds, I was like, yep, this game's over. Before he even passed it to Kiviranta and it's going to win in. So very disappointing for sure. And yeah, definitely a heartbreaker that deserves to be on this list.
It's tough out here. The playoffs, turns out they kind of suck a lot of the time, except for one team every year.
Yep.
That's how it works. I don't know why we signed up for this as fans, but that's where we're at. Maybe make the games a little bit more interesting if you will find ones you care less about. You can gamble on them with Bet365. Why not? certainly something to keep you interested after the Avs get eliminated. I put all my money on Florida all year long, and those paid off, so let's go. Sometimes lucky. When you sign up with Bet365, you can bet on whatever you want, like the Olympics going on right now, and use code DNVR365 when you do. You bet $5 on anything, you get $150 in bonus bets, so you might as well jump in on that and have some fun with some free money, essentially, over at Bet365. Tons of stuff to bet on. Like I said, maybe someone put a good bet down on the men's Olympic gymnastics team. Got themselves a little bit of cash the other night. You can bet on literally anything, though. Esports, they got it. Whatever crazy sport I've never heard of before, they got it. You can get in with everything with Bet365. So use that DNVR365 code. And, of course, when you do gamble with Bet365, you must be 21 or older, physically located in Colorado. And if you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call or text 1-800-GAMBLER today. And once you've earned a little bit of money from Bet365, get yourself over and get yourself some new sunglasses with Shady Rays. Jump on with Shady Rays right now with code DNVR. You get 35% off any of their polarized sunglasses. They have hundreds of different flavors, sizes, shapes, colors to choose from. Something for everyone when it comes to sunglasses. Here at DNVR, we all love our sunglasses from them. We use them all the time. I use them every day to drive into work because it's hot and sunny here every day, and I'm over it. I'm ready for some cooler weather, but at least I'm not going blind staring into the sun, thanks to Shady Rays. Go get them. Go check them out at shadyrays.com. They've been given 5 stars by over 300,000 people. And the coolest part is you might as well try a pair, because if you get them and you don't like them, you lose them or you break them in the first 30 days, Shady Rays will replace them completely for free. So jump on it, shadyrays.com, code DNVR for 35% off today. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast, continuing on our search for the worst Avalanche game of all time. I'm going to be a weird one here, because inarguably the worst statistical game the Avs have ever played came in the 2016-17 season. They lost 10-1 to the Montreal Canadiens, the most goals they've ever given up. It's the only time they've lost by 9 goals directly. I appreciate this game a lot. Not because I hate it, which you should hate it. It was awful. I imagine 90% of people watching it turned it off. But this was the game that made me start making YouTube videos. So, honestly, Montreal beating the Avs 10-1 is the only reason I'm sitting in this chair.
And it's been up and up from there ever since then.
It was pretty much rock bottom, so...
So basically, it's because of you that the Avs won the cup a few years later.
Sure, yeah, we'll go with that.
I will admit, 10-1 that Montreal game, that was definitely the lowest point of my Avalanche fandom growing up. I don't even think I tuned into that many games that year. I think I was more focused anyway on the other football that's not the Broncos that I know you don't like, Rito, that we were talking about before the show. But that one's just hurts, right? And I think now you kind of look back at it and you're able to kind of laugh it off, right? A little bit, knowing kind of what's happened since then, of course, I guess for both teams technically. So it's just kind of one of those where it's just like, at this point. But at the time, I can definitely understand being like, this sucks, right?
Well, I can add to it, and then before that, there was a French person there, Vincent, on the chat. Je te remercie, Vincent, pour tes beaux commentaires. Puis je te dis un beau salut. Rudo has no idea.
No clue.
Melissa has no idea. Evan has no idea. So it's all good. It's just between us, Vincent. And I was just shouting out my guy there. That was just saying that we were doing great work here. So anyway, moving on to that 10-1 game.
A button I can smash that just says French every time you do that.
Put a Geeks logo on it. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah. And I go back to that 10-1 game. I was in Vegas, and I was in my dad's living room. And I got to be honest with you. That's the one time past his, retirement where I remember looking at him sideways a little bit on the couch there, and I could tell he was hurt. Like, he was freaking hurt. Like, he was sad as a lifelong bloodline, like Avalanche. And I remember he was like, Oh boy, this is a tough one. You know what I mean? And especially it was Montreal, and you know what I mean. Like Montreal, it's obviously that doesn't go away. Montreal Quebec rivalry, and you know what I mean. And it was, all the French media and everything. And I remember my dad looking at it, and he was just like, "Oh, this one hurts. Like what is happening?" You know what I mean? So yeah, it's for me. It's a moment. That I agree should be on that list today with that. I feel bad for you with your videos, but it's a good thing. But no, it was my old man was really, really in a different state. Watching that game, and he was like just a little sad. Which again makes you feel bad because you're like you don't want to see your dad sad. You know what I mean? So it was kind of like, and it was genuine. It was real. It was real. Like he was just like, holy shit, what is happening? So a little side note there.
Eric, when did you start with the Flames?
God, they all blend in. All the years blend in. Man.
Let me ask you this way: were you working for them in 2011?
No. That was no. Still with the Avs, right?
Okay, I don't know. You tell me.
Well, tell me the moment. And all.
Well,
I mean.
So up in the chat, someone had mentioned the St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
I did see that.
But that was not even the worst game of that calendar year. Because the Avs in the late 2011 lost 9-1 to the Calgary Flames.
I'm gonna say I was working with the Avs.
No, so you're on the wrong side of this then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I gotta go. I mean, the years blend in, the moments don't, but the years blend in. But yeah, I mean, again, man, there's a lot of games like that. Like you said, like look at the '96 Cup year; they got shit kicked by the Detroit Red Wings right there, like late March or whatever. It was some close to 10-0, 8-0, whatever it was. And those are like I've always told you, like I said earlier, they're tough for fans, they're tough for management. Coaches want to freaking go nuts, but for players, it's like. I'm not saying you don't have pride. You do have pride. It's just it's getting away from you, and it's like, all right, then I'm really thinking about the next one because there's nothing I can do about this one.
2 goals from McGill in that game. 2 goals from Curtis Glencross in that game. It was a 4-point night for Olli Jokinen. Of course, the ex-player curse. Alex Tanguay had a goal in that game too. Scored 5 goals in the first period, so that game was over fast.
Yep.
Hockey sucks sometimes.
Oh, yeah. It does. That's why we love it.
Hey, yeah, look, the fun wouldn't be as fun if it wasn't for the hard parts. That's what I always get into it. Current games again, Evan. I'm sure you have a couple on your list still that we haven't touched on.
I do, and before I get to that, I did think of one other one while I was sitting here.
Go off.
And lo and behold, it's another playoff game. You can tell where a lot of my heartbreak has come from. This was Game 7, 2014, Minnesota. That was my first playoff game experience. Game 7, I went to Game 1 and absolutely loved it.
Yep.
And then Game 7, that low, that one still kind of haunts me. 13-year-old Evan was very, very sad walking out of that arena that night. And just to think too that like every single series had been won by the home team, or every single game in that series had been won by the home team, and the Avs, honestly, were the top seed. They were easily seen as the favorite.
Yep.
And for it to all just kind of come apart like that, it was very, very ugly, to say the least. And it was kind of just a one-year wonder, and we would not know anyway to be pretty much a long few seasons of failure from Patrick Waugh down the line.
It's almost more painful now than it was in the moment for me. Obviously, losing a playoff series like that sucks. Anytime you lose in overtime of Game 7 is awful, but knowing now that was it, like that was supposed to be the start of the next generation, and it went exactly nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
That was tough for me. Like knowing now, 3 years later, they'd have the worst modern season until this year, where the Sharks were worse. So it's not us anymore. Sucks, San Jose. But yeah, it's burned on the least fun era of my Avalanche fandom for sure over the next handful of years. And the game itself, it felt so much like the Avs were supposed to be the team of destiny in that game. The Wild hit multiple crossbars in that overtime, and you're like, the Avs can't lose. Like, everything is on their side, and then Nino rips one bar down, and that's it. It's done. It was tough.
Nino.
Yeah.
It's Nino, right?
Yeah, it was Nino.
The call is still burned into my brain. I can hear it in the back of my mind right now. I don't like it.
Yep. All right. So that's a core loser memory for you.
That's a core
right
one.
there.
That's a core one. I know we've been going over playoff games. How about a regular season game here
Hit
from
me.
me?
Yeah.
And another pretty recent one. And I look back to earlier this year, or I guess earlier last year rather, when the St. Louis Blues came to town that November. I think it ended up being like 8-2 or something like that.
8-2 was the final.
I remember kind of just laughing manically when that game ended. I think they scored like 4 third-period goals or something crazy like
got
that.
Out of hand.
It pretty much just went down the drain, and Bednar just being absolutely livid in the post-game press conference after that one. Understandably so, of course.
Yep.
But that one definitely hurt. For sure. Luckily, it was early in the year, so it wasn't really much at the end, but boy, did that one did sting.
It's
I mean, I'll speak like I'll speak not like a player, but more like a manager. Forget about being a fan, but it's more like sometimes you want to get punched in the mouth. You know what I mean? Sometimes you feel you need to get punched in the mouth, because maybe you're getting away with stuff some games, and you're getting some success, but it's not really sustainable. And if I remember that game there, they got punched in the mouth really good, and I think they turned it around afterwards a little bit, right? You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden, like guys look at each other and say stuff that don't are not fun to say to each other sometimes, and you just kind of turn things around. And as much as I agree with you as a fan, it's a tough one to watch, or as media or whatever it is. Sometimes it's like as a coach, you go home that night, you're driving home, or you're like, oh, maybe that was the remedy. Maybe we needed that, And I remember Bednar was so pissed that night, right? He was pissed, and maybe somewhere somehow like he knew that that's what they needed. Maybe who knows.
I think that game sucked for a few reasons. One, it felt like this past season, certainly before the trade deadline, that this team just wasn't built the right way. Obviously their core was fine, but you look at their trade deadline, Ryjo out, they needed to go and get Casey Middlestat. They had a lot of work to do. It is what that game showed in this last season. And there were just one too many games pre-trade deadline for that version of the Avalanche where it felt like not only did they get beat, but they just didn't show up. They were clearly not the better team on the ice that night. And that happens to everyone. I know I think Brad mentioned it earlier in chat. In the Cup year in 22, they lost 8-3 to Toronto in one of those games. Right. It happens sometimes, but that St. Louis one just felt a little bit different. You were in this really downswing for Colorado at the time. They had already, I think, had that stretch of getting shut out in like 3 of 4 games or whatever it was. Maybe they scored 1 goal in one of them. But it was the first time in the last like 3 years where you felt like, oh, the Avs might not be as good as we think they are. And yeah, again, I think it's lessened the blow a little bit because they went out at the trade deadline and fixed a lot of the problems outside of Georgiev sucking, but then he turned out to be fine in the playoffs, so it is what it is. But that game almost is less, oh, this is one of the worst games ever, but it's the first time maybe in this new Avs era where it was like, should we be concerned? Is there a problem here with this team? And, obviously the season went the way it did. I really don't have that much of a problem with how things played out. Unfortunately, they just... What happened in round 2.
Exactly.
We'll put it that way.
What happened, and ultimately, like I said, it was a wash.
Yeah.
Like, when Rainer Hansen's your second-line center, there's not a lot that you can really do, I feel like. I just thought of another one, too. I'm kind of just coming off the top of the head here.
Go for it, yeah.
And I'm surprised that no one in the chat has actually kind of mentioned it. It's another Blues one. Game 5, second round, 2022.
Yep.
You think about the swing of emotions in that span of like 3 minutes of Nathan MacKinnon going coast to coast with what seemingly was the hat trick, game-winning, series-winning goal, only for it to all just kind of come apart in the next, 2-3 minutes, and then go into overtime, and then that's it, right? And then you're going back to St. Louis. Again, ultimately kind of like a wash at the end of the day. But man, that one stings to just not win it at home after that Nathan MacKinnon performance. And if I'm not mistaken, they were also up like 2 or 3-0, right?
I think it was 2-0.
Yeah, before it all came apart. So
most of these
lovely
games make me sad. That one makes me angry. Like, that is supposed to be the Nathan MacKinnon moment. And when he goes into the Hall of Fame, that goal was supposed to be on the highlight reel as like the time he single-handedly won a playoff series and goes coast to coast to seal it for the Avs, and he's the man and everything's awesome, and they blew it. I'm getting mad just thinking about it right now. Like, it's so stupid that the Avs didn't win that game and that Nathan MacKinnon wasn't the superhero to finish that series off. But in the end, they got it done, so I'll let it go.
I will admit, this is a very much a what if. If Game 6 had gone to overtime and the Blues had won that one in overtime to force Game 7 here, and knowing the Avs' recent records in Game 7s,
that'd have been fine.
I feel like all 3 of those might have been a threefer in that list right there.
If it went that way.
Maybe. Exactly.
But I don't know. I think the Game 7 curse is a meme. I don't think it's real. I think it just happened that way. So.
I agree.
A couple more for you here. I kind of alluded to it earlier, but 2019, San Jose Game 7. This one is, I don't know if it's truly like the worst game for the Avalanche or anything. I think there's a decent chance they would have lost anyway, but the Gabe Landeskog not offside stupidity is something that will stick in Avalanche memory for a very, very long time, as they didn't directly lose the hockey game because of it, but they pretty much lost the game because that goal didn't count. I don't know. Any reason to hate the refs, I guess.
It was a huge swing of momentum, right? Yep. And I think that was kind of the big taking point from that, right? Was I think that was to take the lead, right? 2-1 or 1-1? I don't remember, but I mean, like, and also the fact I think the fact that I think angers people the most with it is that you spent nearly 10 minutes looking at it.
It took forever.
It took forever to like look at it and like, you know, look at like every single little pixel, like
of which there were only 6 because
right?
Their cameras suck.
And so I think that was maybe the more frustrating thing for people, was that it seemed inconclusive because the cameras were bad and you took forever to look at it, and it looked as though you were looking for a reason to disallow it. Maybe. Well, but yeah, I mean, ultimately just brutal.
And it was just a situation that the league wasn't prepared for, because you'll remember the following season they clarified the rule of like, if a dude is changing and he's offside, then he still counts as on the ice. You can't use the 5-foot rule like they do for every other thing when it comes to changes. No, if he's on the ice and offside, he still counts as being offside unless he's fully off the ice. And like, that even plays into why it sucks, because there's that little part of you where you're like, Landy, just jump on the bench, dude. If you just jump off the ice, that goal counts. Like,
sometimes you're so gassed though, like Landy might have been gassed, and then your brain thinks it's moving, like you're moving, but you're not. You know what I mean? And coaches will yell at you on the ice, "Move your butt," and you're like, "Man, I'm freaking moving," but you're really not moving. And you look on video, and you're like, "Oh God." So that might have been one of those moments. He's jumping over the board, like you said. It's like, buddy, can you jump a little quicker here? You know what I mean? And we'll have a situation like that where years later, or even remember when Jax came to visit us, we talked about that moment, right? So it's like it will be talked about for years to come. I mean, it's just one of those weird freaking plays, you know what I mean, that had a big impact on a game.
I think we can just say this. Dang you, Matt Duchene. Like, again, this is all Matt Duchene's fault. Everything can be linked back to
8
Duchene.
feet offsides against Nashville that one time.
All right, that's right.
Rude Raksha in the chat saying Seattle Game 7 was the worst. Honestly, that game wasn't that bad for me. I mean, obviously, you wanted to win it, but Colorado as an organization that season was just so beat down in every single imaginable way that it was like, okay, maybe it's just time for this year to end. Like, it didn't feel like a team that was about to go win the cup that year.
They do make a great point though in the chat, like the Lehkonen offside wiping off the McKinnon goal, and I forgot about that until it was just now put in the chat.
Supposed to tie the game in the third period, but that sucks. About that one. It does suck. Not as bad as your worst game though, Rude Raksha. Randomly came up on my YouTube recommended of you scoring an own goal in Chell. So shout out to that. The only other one I have on my list, and this one is far more personal than any of these other ones, the Nevada Day loss to Vegas. They got blown out. What was it, 7-1, I think? I was at my bachelor party was in Vegas. I went to that game. Not a great bachelor party watching them get dominated in that game. So
it's funny you were there because I was working for the Knights doing their TV. So I was doing the TV that night. That's funny. You were there for your bachelor, but yeah, I was on the air that night for Vegas and with Connor McGahey, and so not a good one.
I don't know. There just always seems to be some games against Vegas where just they love to get a handle on. I mean, look earlier this year, 7-0.
Yep.
In November, I was very much not here for that. I was doing something else. So very happy I missed that game after I saw the final score. And then you look at like the playoff series in 2021. I saw a couple people pointing it out, and I think you can make a case for any of those 4 losses, right? As well. So I don't know, something about Vegas, man. Every time I think you need to get a playoff series against them again just to see what they're really like.
Well, they suck now.
But
so
they suck now, so I don't know. I don't know how likely that's going to happen. The only other, I guess, this is like a twofer for me that I have left. Again, earlier this year, and both happened within a week. Losing to Dallas, and then the next Sunday, blown out 7-0 by the Jets. Yeah. And that was, I think at the time, that was a very telling sign to a lot of people of like, oh God, like, is this 2023 all over again against the Kraken where you're going to go out in round 1 after losing out on both the Central Division title with the Stars. That was basically whoever wins that game is going to win it. And then facing facing the Jets, who you are more likely than not going to face in the playoffs, and getting walloped by them. Like that was a lot of like, oh, is this a sign of like this is what's going to happen? It certainly looked like it after game 1, but it did not happen. So in the end of the day, a wash, as I've said a lot of times today. But boy, at the time, it was just like oh dear, what do we do?
Yeah, the 7-0 game bothered me a little bit less, because it was pretty clear to me that the Avs just made the choice that they were fine with third in the division and basically didn't show up for that game. When you combine that with game 1 and you're going, oh, shit, here we go. And then obviously they win 4 straight and Winnipeg sucks, ha, 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 ha. But certainly in the moment, I totally see how that whole stretch was just like, this isn't good.
Yeah, that's why that's why you got to be able to move on quickly from it, right? And again, the postseason is so different, such a different season. But
of course,
yeah, you're right. After game 1, it didn't look like it. That's for sure.
I think I saw somebody in the chat mention that one also in game 1.
Yeah, someone mentioned
understandable. I think, what was it, 7 goals on 23 shots?
Like the worst goalie performance in the playoffs in like 30 years or something ridiculous. Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, that 7-0 game, I think Yurgiev gave up 4 on 15.
Yeah.
Or something like that too. So There's a lot of questioning at that time for sure.
Yeah.
So understandable, but turned out to be nothing in the end. And now we know that Georgie's going to be here at least for this year and hopefully play well, and is probably due for pretty big raise, pretty big extension. And if that keeps him here or not, who knows?
Do the opposite of what Grubauer did. All right, that Las Vegas game has broken Philip Grubauer, and he's never been a decent goalie since. Maybe that game against the Jets in Game 1 fixed Georgiev.
There you go. Role reversal. I like it.
Yeah, we can only hope, at the very least. Eric, did you have any other games before we wrap this thing up?
Yeah, one more. My last, that's me as a player. That's the one that sucks. My last playoff game as an Avalanche, so that would have been 97-98 season. So spring of 98, we're up 3-1 against Edmonton in the playoffs. We had an up and down year. It was weird. We couldn't find consistency, but we're still a good team, obviously. You're up 3-1, and we lost Game 7 at home at good old McNichols against. And it's not we lost. We got shit kicked. It's not even close. It is the most disappointing game I've ever played. Like I said, the year before, it was the semifinals, and I think we were just out of gas. This one, it's the first round. It just wasn't clicking. Nothing was right. That ended up being my last game as an Avalanche in the playoffs, obviously. But it was you're just in on the bench, and it's like the Twilight Zone, and you feel that there's nothing is going right for you, and it was embarrassing because we were so much better than the Edmonton Oilers, and that was a tough one for me, you know what I mean? And some fans, I'll go back. That was the last game Mark Crawford ever coached for the Avalanche as well. You know, we'll have him on tomorrow on the show, right? And then,
yep.
But anyway, so that was a tough one. That was a tough one. Whenever you're part of a team that can't freaking fix the momentum swing, like you just kind of try to reverse it and you can't do it. And we didn't even come close that game to being in the game. It was a tough one. 98, yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot of tough ones. I'm sure there's plenty we didn't even mention in this show that either for individual reasons or general reasons that sucked. I'm sure you can pick any playoff elimination game and someone will remember that as one of the worst games they've ever watched or been to. So it happens a lot, especially to a team like the Avs that have been to the playoffs a lot. It's part of the cycle of sports in general. You're going to lose a lot, it turns out, but you gotta go through it. You got to go through it to make it to the top. And honestly, the Avs have, as a franchise, been more successful than most. And my favorite statistic about the Avs: only NHL team to have never lost the Cup final. They're 3-0 in Cup finals. So if they make the final, they've always won it. All other teams that have been to at least one final have lost at least one final.
Hope it stays that way for at least a little bit. That's some good history there.
Win another one. Make it 4-0. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm here for. We do have to wrap up today's show. We do appreciate y'all hanging out with us for today. If you've missed the last couple of shows live, that's because we are now doing our shows live for 11 a.m. for the next 3 or 4 weeks of the summer here. So tune in a little bit earlier. Maybe catch us on your lunch break if you want to see us live. Or, of course, you can always watch the VOD on YouTube. Or if you're more of a listener, you can find us on Spotify. So we are going to wrap this one up. As Eric mentioned, we are talking to ex-Avalanche coach Mark Crawford tomorrow. It should be a fun one. Talking Avs, I'm sure we'll talk to him about Austin Matthews and a bunch of other stuff too. But for now, we are out of here. We appreciate y'all, and we will talk to you in the next one.
We all silly like the mayor.